recording? Yeah, it is. So Jai Baba, Sanjay ji, you want to
Jai
read?
Baba. Oh,
Jai
sure.
Baba. Yeah,
Sure, sure.
share the screen.
The seven realities: existence, love, sacrifice, renunciation, knowledge, control, and surrender. I give no importance to creed, dogma, caste, or the performance of religious ceremonies and rites, but to the understanding of the following seven realities. The only real existence is that of the one and only God, who is the self in every finite self. The only real love is the love for this infinity, God, which arouses an intense longing to see, know, and become one with its truth, God. The only real sacrifice is that in which, in pursuance of this love, all things, body, mind, position, welfare, and even life itself, are sacrificed. The only real renunciation is that which abandons, even in the midst of worldly duties, all selfish thoughts and desires. The only real knowledge is the knowledge that God is the inner dweller in good people and in so called bad, in saint and in so called sinner. This knowledge requires you to help all equally as circumstances demand, without expectation of reward, when compelled to take part in a dispute, to act without the slightest trace of enmity or hatred, to try to make others happy with brotherly love, brotherly or sisterly feeling for each one, and to harm no one in thought, word, or deed, not even those who harm you. The only real control is the discipline of the senses to abstain from indulgence in low desires, which alone ensures absolute purity of character. The only real surrender is that in which poise is undisturbed by any adverse circumstance, and the individual, among every kind of hardship, is resigned with perfect calm to the will of God. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, thank you.
Yeah.
So, just an update to everybody. Yeah, welcome to Ranga. Ranga is joining us today. He's on Vidya's connection. We'll have an intro session some other time, one of the weekend sessions. So now yeah, Ranga, I think you said hello. Yeah. So now we took in a couple of chapters on sex and the sanctification of married life, as it was linked to the genders in the reincarnation that we covered. That was part 5. So now we continue from 327, which is part 6. And by the way, I have posted in the advancing stream about the progress overall. We are close to about halfway through the book, so that's good. So it's good to know that we have made progress, and I think by the end of the month we should be able to finish one reading of discourses. So with that, I will start on page 327 on the physical book. Yeah, Baba. Reincarnation and Karma, Part 6, The Operation of Karma Through Successive Lives. Subtitle is Incarnations Governed by a Law of Karma. Is my screen visible?
Yes, visual. Can you increase the font?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. In the successive incarnations of an individual soul, there is not only a thread of continuity and identity manifested in personal memory and revived in the case of advanced souls, but there is also an uninterrupted reign of the law of cause and effect through the persistence and operation of karma. The successive incarnations, with all their particulars, are closely and unfailingly determined by rational law, so that it becomes possible for the individual soul to mold its future through wise and intelligent action. The actions of past lives determine the conditions and circumstances of the present life, and the actions of the present life have their share in determining the conditions and circumstances of future lives. Successive incarnations of the individual soul yield their full significance only in the light of the operation of the law of karma. Karma persists through mental body. The intermittent incarnations in the gross world are only apparently disconnected. Karma persists as a connecting link and determining factor through the mental body, which remains a permanent and constant factor through all the lives of the soul. The law of karma and its manner of operation cannot be fully intelligible as long as the gross body and the gross world are considered to be the only facts of existence. Karmic determination is made possible by the existence of the subtle and mental bodies and worlds. Mental and subtle bodies. The plane on which one can possess physical consciousness is the gross world. The planes on which one can possess consciousness of desires are in the subtle world, and the planes on which the soul have mental consciousness are in the mental world. The source of desire is to be found in the mind, which is on the mental plane. Here, the seed of desire is attached to the mind. The desire exists here in a latent form in the same way as the tree is latent in the seed. The mental body, which is the seat of the mind, is often called Karana Sharira or the causal body because it stores within itself the seeds or the causes of all desires. The mind retains all impressions and dispositions in a latent form. The limited I or ego is composed of these samskaras. However, the actual manifestation of sanskaras in consciousness, as expressed through different mental processes, takes place in the subtle body. Formation and continuation of ego mind. The soul, which in reality is one and undifferentiated, is apparently individualized through the limitations of the mental body, which is the seat of the ego mind. The ego mind is formed by the accumulated impressions of past experiences and actions. And it is this ego mind that constitutes the kernel of the existence of the reincarnating individual. The ego mind, as a reservoir of latent impressions, is the state of the mental body. The ego mind, becoming spirit and experiencing activated and manifested impressions, is the state of the subtle body. The ego mind, as descended in the gross sphere for creative action, is the state of a physical incarnation. Thus, the ego mind, which is seated in the mental body, is the entity that contains all the phases of continued existence as a separate individual. So, if you want to pause and distinguish between these two, this is a very, very clear and beautiful explanation of the minds and the worlds, which I think would have been helpful even in our God Speaks journey. So if there are any comments or any further delineations, it's a good point for me to pause.
There were terms that we were not familiar with while we spoke in God Speaks.
Yes.
So anyway, it's come up, so it's getting clearer.
Yes, so that's what I was thinking.
Can you elaborate a bit more? Sorry.
What was the question, please?
No specific question. We thought this would have helped if we had read this before God Speaks, because a lot of terms came up that we used in God Speaks and flew through it.
I think
the bodies and the worlds and causal body, Karana Sharir, and so on and so forth. So you want to elaborate a bit more for clarity?
Absolutely. I think that one is that we use the gross body till the zero to the planes of involution. We start using the subtle body, and that is between the first and fourth plane. Remember, first plane and fourth plane are thresholds between the world and the world, and the between the mental world. So the fifth and plane has to do with the mental body and being in the mental, which is basically so. Uh, what you take away from here is that again, the body has aspects. One is subtle body. We call it Sthul Sharir, Sukshma Sharir, and Manas Sharir. Here it's called Karan Sharir also. That's another word. Another thing is that the subtle body and the mental body preserved after the physical, so-called physical have is only a transition from, we say, to the astral body, to the astral world, and then we come back, we call as an reincarnation. So, so the is the takeaway, subtle preserve all the impressions of our action of words and deeds, all as imprints or sanskara, are preserved in the mental body. So, as it says, and the mental body is the state of the ego mind. So that is the main of
No, the audio is gone.
I-
Kama, your audio is a bit patchy today.
Patchy today, yes.
But I roughly understood what he's explaining, partly maybe.
Sorry. Okay. I hope the audio becomes better later. Deva.
Yeah. Jai Baba. Thank you. Thanks, Kama.
It is interesting. I was going through the God Speaks there on page 2, the entire summary, and the Sukshma Shari is also known as Prana. So that's a lot of in the Vedantic, you know, uh, ideology. This is a beautiful summary on page 2 of God Speaks.
Yeah. So I'm having trouble. Are you able to see my screen now?
We can see your screen. We can
Thank
see your
you.
screen.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I will continue then. Thanks for that clarity. And I think Sunil put it correctly. It would have been really helpful if we had read this in this amount of clarity before coming to God Speaks. So, formation and continuation of the ego mind. The soul, which in reality is one and undifferentiated, is apparently individualized through the limitations of the mental body, which is the seat of the ego mind. The ego mind is formed by the accumulated impressions of past experiences and actions. And it is this ego mind that constitutes the kernel of the existence of the reincarnating individual. The ego mind, as a reservoir of latent impressions, is the state of the mental body. The ego mind, becoming spirit and experiencing activated and manifested impressions, is the state of the subtle body. The ego mind, as descended in the gross sphere for creative action, is the state of a physical incarnation. Thus, the ego mind, which is seated in the mental body, is the entity that contains all the phases of continued existence as a separate individual. Stored impressions determine conditions of incarnation. The ego mind, seated in the mental body, takes lower bodies according to the impressions stored in it. These impressions determine whether individuals will die young or old, whether they will experience health or illness or both, whether they will be beautiful or ugly, whether they will suffer from physical handicaps like blindness or will enjoy general efficiency of the body, whether they will have a sharp or a dull intellect, whether they will be pure or impure of heart, fickle or steadfast in will, and whether they will be immersed in the pursuit of material gains or will seek the inner light of the spirit. The game of duality. The ego mind, in its turn, becomes modified through through the deposited impressions of karma, which include not only gross and physical action, but thought and feeling. And the circumstances of each incarnation are adjusted to the composition and needs of the ego mind. Thus, if a person has developed certain special capacities or tendencies in one incarnation, he takes them on to the succeeding incarnations. Similarly, things that have been left incomplete in one incarnation can be completed in the incarnations that follow. Through the persistence of impressions, the karmic links that have been forged in one incarnation are carried on and developed in succeeding incarnations. Those who have been closely associated with each other through good or bad dealings therefore tend to have recurring contacts. Thus, the game of duality is carried on long enough to gather so much experience of the opposites that the soul, out of the fullness of its experience, eventually becomes ripe for dropping the ego mind and turning inward to know itself as the oversoul. Claims and counterclaims created by give and take. If there has been a give and take between certain persons that forges karmic and sanskaric ties between them and creates claims and counterclaims, they have to come together and carry on fresh dealings in order to meet these claims and counterclaims. That which a person gives with a selfish motive binds him in the same way as that which he takes with a sense of separateness. The transaction of give or take, which thus binds, need not be purely on a material plane in the form of exchange of goods or money, nor in the performing of some physical tasks. It could consist of the exchange of views or feelings. So, binding, yeah, karma of interference is the next subtitle. If a person pays respect to a saint on the higher planes of consciousness, he creates a claim against him. The saint, who is still crossing the inner planes and treading the spiritual path, must then tarry and give such help as will bring the person paying respect to that point on the path which he himself has reached. Paying respect to an advanced soul thus amounts to a karma of interference. Though respect as such is a good thing to receive, in receiving it, the advanced soul may have to halt on the spiritual path until he has helped the person who came to him and paid respect. Responsiveness of souls. The quick and unfailing responsiveness of souls is expressed in the law that hate begets hate, lust begets lust, and love begets love. This law operates not only during a single lifetime, but across several lives. An individual feels impelled to hate or fear an enemy from past lives, although the present life may not have provided him with any apparent reason for this attitude. In the same way, without any apparent reason from the present life, he is impelled to love and help a friend from past lives. In most cases, the person may not be aware of the reason for his unaccountable attitude, but that does not mean there is no reason for it. Many things that seem inexplicable on the surface become intelligible when considered in the light of karmic links brought forward from past lives. The law of karma is law exhibiting itself through continuously changing mutual adjustments which must go on when there are individual souls who seek self-expression in a common world. It is an outcome of the responsiveness of ego minds. The rhythm in which two souls start their relationship tends to perpetuate itself unless the souls, through fresh, intelligent karma, change the rhythm and raise it to a higher quality. Freedom to choose and fate. As a rule, accumulated karma has a certain inertia of its own. It does not change the nature of its momentum unless there is a special reason for it. Before karma is created, the individual has a sort of freedom to choose what it shall be. But after it has been delineated, it becomes a factor that cannot be ignored and that either has to be expended through the results it invites or counteracted by fresh and appropriate karma. The pleasure and pain experienced in life on earth, the successes or failures that attend it, the attainments and obstacles with which it is strewn, the friends and foes who appear in it, all are determined by the karma of past lives. Karmic determination is popularly designated as fate. Fate, however, is not some foreign and oppressive principle. Fate is man's own creation, pursuing him from past lives. And just as it has been shaped by past karma, it can also be modified, remolded, and even undone through karma in the present life. So I think we were
Beautiful.
talking
I think
about,
he has cleared very, very important facts that which puzzle our mind. The last couple of lines, actually.
exactly,
Very good.
exactly.
Yeah,
And also
yeah.
it
Karma.
clarified the question I had some time back about free will. And
Yes.
I mean, it is a
Yeah,
very
we just-
powerful
Yeah.
chapter and paras.
Yeah.
I'll read the last line. Fate is man's own creation, pursuing him from past lives. And just as it has been shaped by past karma, it can also be modified, remolded, and even undone through karma in the present life. Right? Becoming master of own destiny is the next section. Just as the nature of karma is.
Great.
Ashok, are you trying to say something to us?
Yeah, just one second.
Ashok, I think your audio is bad. You'll have to text your question.
Of karma. So, I mean, every month is mentioned in dialogue important.
I'm sorry, I don't
Yeah,
think
not
we
able
were
to
able
hear.
to hear you. So please post your question if it's a question.
Please continue.
Okay. Thank you. Becoming master of own destiny.
It's just an
Just as the nature of karma in earthly life is determined by impressions stored in the ego mind, the impressions in turn are determined by the nature of karma in earthly life. The impressions in the ego mind and the nature of karma are interdependent. Karma on earth plays an important part in shaping and reshaping the impressions in the ego mind and giving it a momentum that decides the future destiny of the individual. It is in the arena of earthly existence that creative and effective karma can be expressed through the medium of the gross body. Proper understanding and use of the law of karma enables man to become master of his own destiny through intelligent and wise action. Each person has become what he is through his own accumulated actions. And it is through his own actions that he can mold himself according to the pattern of his heart, or finally emancipate himself from the reign of karmic determination which governs him through life and death.
Karthik,
Yeah.
just wanted to make few points here. Can I?
Sure.
Okay, so page number 328, just we read, and we said that the limited I or ego is composed of these sanskaras. However, the actual manifestation of sanskaras in consciousness as expressed through different mental processes takes place in the subtle body. So one thing I understood is that the sanskaras also get burnt in mental and subtle bodies. So some processes, it is not necessary that if karma and when it comes to karma and sanskaras, it is not necessary that everything is happening in the gross sphere. Some of them also get burnt in those two spheres also. That is one point I wanted to make. The second thing, this is again fate. Just now you reread that last sentence, that fate is man's own creation, pursuing him from past lives. So here also I think this, Baba is saying that though we come burden of past karmas and the sanskaras through our actions. Is my speaker working?
Yes, yes, perfectly. Speaker and mic.
Yeah. So I think Baba is also saying that through our though the fate is we come with certain burden, but through our own action we can change a few things. So is the adjustments of sanskaras, because a lot of people are under the impression that something that has happened cannot be changed. But because we change some of them in the mental and subtle spheres, like for example in the dreams a lot of sanskaras are burnt if Baba wants really something to happen, because the being is consolidated of all the three spheres. It is not necessary that everything has to happen in gross sphere. So in the dream state also some of them are resolved, and so we don't have to live them in the gross sphere. So this one has to understand, and of course there should be a grace, and the soul should be eligible for that kind of dwelling on. The other thing is, just now what you said was karma on earth plays an important part in shaping and reshaping the impressions in the ego mind and giving it a momentum that decides the further destiny of the individual. I think this is also karma, that we can change our destiny, and things we can redirect things. So that power is given to individuals. Hence it becomes necessary that we use our common sense while we are living this life, when Baba has given that power to human beings.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
I have a small question here. When we say that,
actually, I think yes.
Go ahead.
Mama and then Sanjay. Mama, go ahead.
As said here, the karma part of it is dissolved or say nullified in the other spheres, not in the gross itself. Whether this happens while we are in the gross plane or when we are involuting into the other spheres. So that is the question.
Can you just explain a little more?
While we are living now in the gross sphere, as the dissolution of the karma simultaneously happens in the subtle as well as mental spheres, mental planes of us, or only when we involute and reach these planes, does the karma dissolve? That is the question. One answer you have already given, that in the dream state itself, there are possibilities of karma being reduced. That is while we are in the gross sphere itself. So I have a confusion here.
So one thing is, this question that you have asked about the involution, in the last discussion also, I think you have brought up, and I was telling that we should discuss that later probably, and I think now the time has come when your question on involution and the
incarnation.
You had something, and I think that is getting mixed up here also now. Now, one thing is whether we are in the process of evolution or involution, that has to be really understood. When we are in the cycles, birth and cycle, 84 billions of unis which Baba talks about, are we if we are still in the process of taking more births and we have not yet reached the first plane, or we are now not yet started seeking God, then we are in the process of evolution still. The day we started seeking God and started looking at more inner plane, then we are like getting into the involution time. So that is one clarification that I wanted to give. Now, whatever happens, like on the involution thing, what the gross, mental and sphere is there in the evolution time also and involution time also. The three planes are constantly existing in all the things. So I was talking about there are three worlds, that is gross world, mental world and subtle world. And there are three planes, that is the gross plane, mental, subtle plane and mental plane. Now the words and planes should not be confused. So when we are in the first, second and third plane, we are in the gross plane, or we just entered the plane. Then we are at the threshold of the third and fourth plane, where we are entering the subtle planes. And from fifth and sixth, there are mental planes. Now these planes are different from the worlds. The worlds are simultaneously existing. We are a bunch of gross, subtle and mental all the time. Even in the animal form, they are not conscious of this, they're not conscious of these worlds, but for them also it exists, as per what Baba is explained to us. So my understanding is the worlds, all the three worlds exist. In the involution period, you go on to the planes, and the planes are different from the worlds. And when, as far as karma and burning of sanskaras are concerned, once you burn any sanskara on the gross plane, it gets burnt on subtle and mental sphere also. And if you are burning a sanskara on a mental plane, it gets burnt on gross and subtle plane also. Because we are one person with all the three, what do you call, faculties. For the ease of understanding, we have all the three faculties. We are the same person. If you do something on the gross, other two things are taken care of. Does it answer your question?
Probably I need to study it further.
Vidya,
I need more inputs.
Yeah.
Can I?
Yeah.
Bit of confusion here. Karthik, can you open God Speaks page 139? There's a chart which shows 4 journeys, and it has pictures of subtle world, mental world, along with the planes.
Sure. 1 second. Yes.
You project it?
Yeah, I'm just bringing it up. What page number?
139, and opposite to that is chart 6.
The chart which was redrawn by Amita.
Oh yes, Mama remembers.
The journey.
The 4 journeys.
4 journeys.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this one explains the subtle world, mental world, and the planes, which Vidya was referring to just now. And they seem to be attached to each other. The subtle world is plane 1, 2, 3, and mental world is 4, 5, 6. Looks like that, unless I misunderstood. And the gross world is at the bottom, and this is our journey.
Yeah.
Yes. Sunil, after you finish, I'll add on to what you have just said and what Vidya has said.
I'm done. So this looks a bit different from what Vidya explained, unless I misunderstood. So I just wanted clarity.
I think that just to add on to what Vidya said, I think looking at the chart, it's clear that the second, third planes are in the subtle world, and the fifth and sixth plane are in the mental world. I think probably what she was referring to is, not to confuse about the dissolution of the sanskaras, because there are 3 kinds of sanskaras, which is the gross, subtle, and mental sanskaras. So according to my understanding, thoughts create mental sanskaras, words, emotions, desires create subtle sanskaras, and deeds create the gross sanskaras, the action part, action of thoughts, words, and deeds. So technically what happens is, when we are now in the reincarnation stage at the 0th plane for mortal human beings like myself, who are still dealing with the 5 senses, the touch, taste, sound, smell, sight, I have gross sanskaras. Now, only when the gross sanskaras are converted to subtle sanskaras, this is according to God Speaks, from what I've understood. Once the gross sanskaras are completely converted to subtle sanskaras, then the involution play starts. And even in the first plane of involution, the gross body is actually experiencing subtle sanskaras in a way. Like, it's a little bit confusing. We have to read that. It's very difficult to articulate here. But what I've understood is that once you go into the plane of involution, we are dealing only with the subtle sanskaras and mental sanskaras depending on which plane you are in. So between the second, third plane, you are basically dealing with using your subtle body. You are dealing with your subtle and mental sanskaras. And then when you've crossed the threshold of the fourth plane, and when you're in the fifth and sixth plane, all the subtle sanskaras have been converted into mental sanskaras. This is according to God Speaks. So when you're in the fifth and sixth plane, you're only dealing with mental sanskaras, but you will still be using your gross body, subtle body indirectly, but the mental body will be using directly. So right now at the zeroth plane, we are using our gross body directly and the subtle body and mental body indirectly. This is what I've understood about sanskaras.
So Sunil, I think I may have stated those numbers wrong because I'm not so good at numbers and remembering the chart and all that.
That's okay, Vidya.
Thank you for populating this because it helps me understand better. But I think, the numbering part of it, but I think the overall thing of worlds and planes is what I wanted to bring to focus, because sometimes we confuse between worlds and planes.
Right. So are we saying that every person has a bit of, gross body, subtle body, mental body, and we are living at the same time in three different bodies and three different worlds? Just that maybe one circle is bigger than the other and third one is very small for us because we are on the gross plane or something like that. I'm not sure how to correlate all these things.
I think so. This is
Baba said
easy way to understand. Yeah.
Right.
I think, as Baba said, we can live only one sphere at a time because of our limited consciousness. Baba was living all the spheres at all levels and all the worlds all together because he is avatar. But in human form, I think we can at a time. It doesn't mean that we are not conscious about other sphere. But right now, when I'm on the gross body, maybe I can't be on the mental or the other spheres at this time, but it doesn't mean that I am not conscious of it. So I can use other faculty when I want to use that faculty, but at a particular time, at a given time, maybe we are only in the one sphere. Kama, does it agree with God Speaks?
Yeah. I think another aspect we have to understand is we don't know which we can be going veiled. For example, Vidya is probably where she doesn't know which plane she is in. I can only say that I'm still in the zeroth plane because I'm dealing with my physical senses. But what
I don't know. Okay.
What I feel is that
this gross interaction goes down from these numbers.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, carry on.
Oh yeah. Yes. So what I'm trying to say is that technically, as Baba said, there is nothing like birth and death. There is only one birth during the most original whim, and that is duality starts from that. And the real death is the getting over duality, where duality, that Manonash happens. Whatever is happening in between, especially now when we have taken human birth and going through different incarnations, is basically dropping off different gross bodies, the physical body, which we call as physical death. The subtle body and mental body are preserved, and each time in each incarnation, whatever sanskaras we accumulate, gross, subtle, mental, are stored in the mental body as what you call as the mind ego. So yes, in the gross body, we are dealing with the subtle body and mental body, and we are using them indirectly in our day-to-day life. I hope I answered your question, Sunil.
Yes, that's what I was trying to summarize. I'm not sure my words were correct. Okay, over to Mama. Mama, did I think the original question was yours. Sorry.
Okay, my understanding now is we have a very large gross body and small subtle and mental body, and we have to reduce this gross body as much as possible to increase the subtle, or make it aware or make it available for modification, and then go to the mental. But all three bodies are being modified in our day-to-day life, depending on how best we attack the karma. But more of it is in the gross right now, and it gradually becomes more in the subtle later on, and ultimately it reaches the mental, where all the other two are totally eliminated. That's how I understood it.
I think instead of body, you should say the sanskaras have to be modified.
Yes. Sanskaras related to the gross, subtle, and mental. That is the action, word, and the thought.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying. Okay, Karthik. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it was a good interaction that clarified this, both sides. Sanjay, I think you were asking something when Mama started his question. So do you still have that question?
Sanjay,
I mean, it is covered by all other sections.
Discussion.
I mean, we carry the three sanskars, and then so that's what I wanted to say, and then same thing has been said. Yeah.
Okay.
Continue.
Okay, great. Thank you. Two kinds of karma is the next section. Broadly speaking, karma is of two kinds: that which binds and that which helps towards emancipation and self-realization. Good as well as bad karma binds as long as it feeds the ego mind through wrong understanding. But karma becomes a power for emancipation when it springs from right understanding and wears out the ego mind. Right understanding in this respect is best imparted by the perfect masters who know the soul in its true nature and destiny, along with the complications created by karmic laws. True karma begins with distinction between good and bad. The karma that truly comes into existence after a person has developed a sense of distinction between good and bad. During the first 7 years of childhood, the impressions that are released for expression are very faint. They also entail a consciousness of the world correspondingly less responsive to the distinctions of the world. Therefore, the actions of children under 7 years do not leave any strong or effective impressions on the ego mind, and they do not play any important part in shaping their future. True and effective karma, which molds the ego mind and its future, begins after the individual develops a sense of responsibility. This sense of responsibility is dependent upon a sense of distinction between good and bad, which usually dawns fully after one has passed the first few years of childhood. Comparison with law of cause and effect. The law of karma in the world of values can be compared to the law of cause and effect that operates in the physical world. If there were no law of cause and effect in the physical world, there would be chaos and people would not know what to expect. In the same way, if there were no law of karma in the world of values, there would be an utter uncertainty of the results that people cherish, and they would not know whether to expect good or bad from their actions. In the world of physical events, there is a law of conservation of energy, according to which no energy is ever lost. In the world of values, there is a law that once karma comes into existence, it does not mysteriously flitter away without leading to its natural results, but persists until it bears its own fruit or is undone through counteracting karma. Good actions lead to good results, and bad actions lead to bad results. Law of karma maintains moral order of the universe. The moral order of the universe is sustained through the systematic connection between the cause and effect in the world of values. If the law of karma were subject to any relaxation, reversals, or exceptions, and if it were not strictly applicable in the domain of values, there would be no moral order in the universe. Human existence would be precarious from the standpoint of the attainment of values. In a universe without moral order, human endeavor would be perpetually fraught with doubt and uncertainty. There cannot be any serious pursuit of values if there is no assured connection between means and ends, or if the law of karma can be set aside. The inflexibility of the law of karma is a condition for significant human action, which would be utterly impossible if the law of karma could be safely ignored or flouted. Law of karma, an expression of justice. In its inviolability, the law of karma is like the other laws of nature. However, the rigorousness of the operation of karmic laws does not come to the soul as the oppressiveness of some external and blind power, but as something involved in the rationality of the scheme of life. Karmic determination is the condition of true responsibility. It means that an individual will reap as he sows. What a person gathers by way of experience is invariably connected with what he does. If a person has done an evil turn to someone, he must accept the penalty for it and welcome the evil rebounding upon himself. If he has done a good turn to someone, he must also receive the reward for it and enjoy the good rebounding upon himself. What he does for another, he has also done for himself, although it may take time for him to realize that this is exactly so. The law of karma is an expression of justice and a reflection of the unity of life in the world of duality. So with that, we are ending part 6. Any other discussions? Any questions?
I have some takeaways of this particular.
Sure.
One is the law of karma, which is equivalent to the law of cause and effect, which basically reminds me of Newton's third law of motion: action begets reaction. It says clearly on page 332, the law of karma in the world of values can be compared to the law of cause and effect that operates in the physical world. In fact, a lot of you know my own vision of the interrelationship between laws of matter and laws of spirit. I call it material science and spiritual science are interrelated. And just like we have laws of matter, in laws of spirit or spiritual science is something what we have read in God Speaks and discourses and many of our ancient scriptures. So I think that when you look at the law of karma, another one which says here is the moral order of the universe is sustained through the systematic connection between cause and effect in the world of values. So again, what we are seeing here is that there is a scientific process to even in spirituality. If we can, connect that, if we can crack that. For example, we have read that these are what I call as divine laws. And we also know from reading Beams, there were 4 kinds of laws. First law is the laws of matter, material science. Above it is the laws of the metaphysical world, supernatural world. Then above that is the law of karma, cause and effect. And the highest law is the law of divine grace. So I think it's very interesting. I think I've said that to Sunil also, that I believe we are playing a Baba ball game. In this ball game, there are divine laws, and you have to understand how these laws are structured. Just like in the physical world, in the laws of matter, we have physical constants and mathematical constants. Pi is equal to 3.1415, gravitational constant, Planck's constant. Similarly, when you look at the spiritual science, Baba has talked about the 84 lakh lives, which has been, expressed in other scriptures. We have also like the 56 self-realized laws at a time on planet Earth, 7,000 people on the spiritual hierarchy. So it's almost like a numbers game, So this is what I wanted to kind of say, the takeaway from this chapter, apart from that explanation on destiny. Do you have free will, power of choice, or are we all conditioned by our fate? So I think these are the 2 things which come out of this chapter.
I think it's a chapter so important that we probably should read at least once in a fortnight, maybe. At least a few paragraphs of this, actually, if not everything.
Karthik, are you on mute?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Karthik is on mute.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So, okay, I've been trying to read part 7. I'm trying to read part 7 on mute. Oh, there was a cart that was being dragged, so I went on mute to save you from the sound, and then come back out. Sorry.
Karthik.
Yeah.
One more point I wanted to make out was on page number 329 as the highlight. There is one highlight which says game of duality. So that is where my acronym came, GOD, game of duality. It's very clear in that particular chapter in page 329. So GOD is just a semantic expression, but technically what it means for all of us is that get over duality, or this is the game of duality, and you have to know the rules of the game, and you have to practice, and know how to play the game. That's my vision.
Kama, this is your favorite topic, huh? I can't miss it. Yeah, I will remember your GOD.
GOD, yes. So I'll continue. Part 7, Destiny of the Reincarnating Individual, Karmic Debts and Dues. The series of incarnations which the soul is impelled to take through karmic determination has a tendency to become endless. Through innumerable lives, an individual has come into contact with countless persons, and he has had all kinds of dealings of give and take with them. He is, I think somebody has to go on mute. He is entangled in a web consisting of all sorts of debts to pay and dues to recover. According to karmic law, he can avoid neither the debts nor the dues, since both are the outcome of karma inspired by desire. He keeps incarnating in order to pay off his debts and to recover his dues. But even when he means to clear up the account, he is often unable to do so. Difficulty of clearing up debts and dues. All persons with whom an individual has karmic links of debts or dues may not be incarnate when he has taken a body, or owing to the limitations imposed by his own capacities and circumstances, he may be unable to meet all the complex requirements of a situation. While he is trying to clear up accounts with those with whom he has had past links, in this very attempt, he cannot help creating fresh claims and counterclaims concerning them. Even with new persons, he cannot help but create debts and dues of diverse kinds and magnitudes and get involved with them. An individual thus goes on adding to his debts and dues, with the result that there is no getting out of his endlessly increasing and complex karmic entanglements. Master can clear debts and dues. The spinning of the yarn of karmic debts and dues would be endless if there were no provision for getting out of the karmic entanglements through the help of a perfect master. He can not only initiate an aspirant into the supreme art of non-binding karma, but can become directly instrumental in freeing him from his karmic entanglements. The master has attained unity with God, whose cosmic and universal life includes all persons. Being one with all life and in his representative capacity, he can become, for the sake of the aspirant, the medium for the clearing up of all debts and dues that have come into existence through the aspirant's dealings with countless individuals contacted in his incarnations. If a person must get bound to someone, it is best for him to get bound to God or a master, because this tie ultimately facilitates emancipation from all other karmic ties. What are we doing on time? Okay. Relationship with master carried on through lifetimes. When the good karma of past lives has secured for the aspirant the benefit of having a master, the best thing that he can do is surrender himself to the master and to serve him. Through surrenderance, the aspirant throws the burden of his karma on the master, who has to find ways and means of freeing him from it. Through serving the master, he wins an opportunity to get clear of his karmic entanglements. The relationship between the master and the disciple is often carried on from one life to another for several reincarnations. Those who have been connected with a master in past lives are drawn to him by an unconscious magnetism, not knowing why they are thus drawn. There is usually a long history to the apparently unaccountable devotion that the disciple feels for his master. The disciple is often beginning where he had left off in the last incarnation. When the disciple invites the attention and grace of a master, it is not without reason. Sometimes the master seems to impart spirituality to a disciple without there being any apparent effort or sacrifice on the part of the disciple. But these are always cases in which the disciple has earned the right to this favor by his associations and endeavors in past lives. This section is called Inviting Grace of Master. The love and devotion the disciple may have felt for the master in his past lives have formed a deep connection between him and the master, so that the awakening of spiritual longing in the disciple has its counterpart in the grace and help that flow to him from the master. It is through his own past non-binding karma that a person invites the grace of the master, just as it is through his own binding karma that he invites upon himself the pleasure and pain, as well as the good and evil of which he is the recipient in this life. Spiritual progress requires active effort. As a rule, the person who has entered the spiritual path gradually advances until he attains the goal. This does not apply to those who have not definitely entered the path or have no master to guide them. Through their chaotic pursuits of several lifetimes, most persons are likely to go further away from the goal by the heaping up of binding samskaras. Hence, spiritual progress cannot be said to be automatic in the sense that it will come about without the active effort of the person concerned. I think we still have time. Danger of falling back. Sooner or later, however, the logic of experience gathered through several lives drives everyone to enter the path and seek the highest goal. Once the aspirant enters the path, he usually goes forward with steady progress. As he advances on the path, he often develops certain latent capacities that enable him not only to experience consciously the inner, subtle, and mental worlds, but also to manipulate the forces and powers available on the higher planes of consciousness. Yet, the crossing of the first few planes does not necessarily ensure safe and steady progress. There are many pitfalls on the path itself, and unless there is the assured guidance of a master, the aspirant is in danger of falling back. Yoga Brashta. From any of the first few planes, the aspirant, instead of going forward toward the goal, may have such a setback. In exceptional cases, an aspirant of the fourth plane may, through abuse of his powers, invite upon himself such a fall that it takes ages for him to return to his earlier point of progress. The aspirant who has such a fall is known as a Yoga Brashtu. Even the yogis are subject to the unyielding law of karma, which knows no exceptions, concessions, or preferences. It is only when the aspirant has the advantage of the guidance by a perfect master that the spiritual journey is rendered safe and steady. And it is only then that there is no possibility of a fall or retrogression. The master steers the aspirant from negative karma in which he might otherwise become involved. Treading the spiritual path continues for several incarnations before the aspirant attains the goal. Centuries of continued sacrifices, service, self-purification, suffering, and determined search have to roll on if the aspirant is to be spiritually prepared for the final realization of God. God realization, which is the goal of the reincarnating individual, is never an attainment of a single life. It is always the culmination of his continued endeavor through many lives. Unintelligent karma of many lives has created the bindings of the individual soul, and it has to be undone by the persistent creation of intelligent and non-binding karma carried on for many more lives. I will stop here and open up for any questions or comments before we wind up.
I think today's reading was one of the most inspiring and the most, what we need to do in practical life is got very much cleared this morning. Very useful day, I suppose.
Indeed. Indeed. Profound and impactful.
Yeah. So the fundas are getting cleared, how to live our life on day-to-day basis. Yeah.
True. True.
I think the spelling of yoga brashta, that's not brushtu.
Yeah, it's not brushtu, it's brashta.
And I think one of the things that take away from both chapters is that the importance of a perfect master. That, whenever we are in the spiritual path, it's very much important to have the guidance of a perfect master so that we don't get stuck in any of the planes and have any kind of pitfalls or setbacks. So that is something that came out of this chapter, and that inviting the grace of the master. So again, the divine grace, which comes back to the first law, the most important law in the universe is divine grace. And personally, I have seen in my life, I have made a lot of effort in many different things. Some things have worked, some things have not worked out, and I've realized it's only through divine grace, when it's ordained by divine grace, then things happen. But we have to keep making the effort, where it says in the last line that you read, the persistent creation of intelligent and non-binding karma carried on for many more lives. So persistence is very important, making the effort. Jai Baba.
Use the word active effort.
Yeah. So the most important factor or the difficult factor is the identification of non-binding action or karma. How to identify what is the non-binding way of living.
I will suggest you to do Vipassana for 10 days. It will make it very clear about the concept of sanskaras and what is intelligent action, which is non-binding karma, and what is unintelligent action, which is binding karma. So that is a very practical technique that has helped me a lot, and I recommend that to everybody. It clears up all the pandas about sanskaras. Yes.
Okay.
Interesting. We should talk about that. You should talk about that one of the Saturdays. Yeah. I don't know much about Vipassana.
Neither do I.
Yeah. I will not only for I'll give you for all the three bodies: gross body, subtle body, mental body. Gross body, you do.
Busy bodies.
Busybody.
Yeah, that's what we are doing. Busybody all the time when we are awake. Sleep is the best state. We are in bliss. We are self-realized when we are in sleep state. The only challenge is the waking state and not creating non-binding karma. So I personally, just to summarize, for my gross body, I've used Hatha Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga. For subtle body, I've used Kriya Yoga. And for mental body, I've used Vipassana. But the most important lesson I've learned is don't get identified with any of the techniques. They are only tools. That is why Baba was, against any kind of meditation practice or anything, because we start identifying with the practice and lose, the significance of the real goal, which is actually remembering Baba and being loving to everybody. So this is my experience. Jai Baba.
Good point.
Jai Baba. So
tomorrow is the longer of the sessions, weekend, 1.5 hours. So welcome to join. And then we have two special sessions, one by Vidya and one by Sridhar Mama. So
mine is Sunday, I think.
Sunday, yeah. That's what. Saturday and Sunday. That's what I meant.
Okay. Tomorrow is Friday or Saturday?
Tomorrow is Saturday.
Okay.
So, by the way, I noticed that Teams has updated, so there's a lot more of artificial intelligence. It picks up the person who's speaking and puts them up and all of that. So that's because of an update. So I request all of you to update your versions of Teams, so it might be improving the experience overall. With that, I wrap up. Enjoy your day.
Jai Baba.
Jai
Jai
Baba.
Baba.
Thank you.
Jai Baba. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.